Okay, let's take a look at government. We're going to look at the early colonial governments, but we first want to start off with what a government is. So a couple things that governments do that are universal is they set up rules, okay? And generally these are found in forms of laws, okay? Now the purpose of that is to regulate society, all right? Now the purpose of regulating society is to create order and stability. Now, when order and stability are present, this allows a functioning economy. With a functioning economy, you then allow people to sustain a happy life. Without a functioning economy, you have less access to resources and then greater discontent by the public. So let's take a look at what different types of governments exist. All right, here's a few governments that you may have seen in world history. When there's no government present, this is anarchy. Okay, this gets a bit crazy because there's no central direction or guidance, and therefore there's not a good set of laws or stability. Now, when we see monarchy and dictatorship, we could think of maybe the French Revolution, okay? And the response to that would be the Enlightenment. Next up, when you have a few people ruling, you have either like a military junta, which we may see sometimes in Latin America, or an oligarchy, ruled by a few. Okay? We saw that in post-Soviet Russia. Okay? Now, moving on to what's going to be most critical for us, all right, will be different types of democracy. And the two that we're going to focus on are direct democracy and then representative democracy. Okay? Let's now take a look at that. Now, before we get there, let's kind of zoom in and refresh our memory on some of the geography. So right up here in this coast right here, okay, are the British colonies. This is the foundation for our course. Now, central to North America, we'll see a large amount of land and territory be controlled by the French. Okay? And the rest of the territory will be almost unanimously used by the Spanish, which is why Central and South America, many of the populations there predominantly speak Spanish, except for Brazil, okay, where they speak Portuguese. So here, we have Spain, we have Portugal. So again, for the purposes of us, we're going to be looking at the British colonies and kind of how these populations are going to set up a government in the first 13 colonies. Okay. Going back to this. All right, so the first type of democracy is a direct democracy. And democracy, demos, comes from the Greek origins, which means people. And in this case, it means people have the power to regulate rules, laws, and society. So now let's look at the difference between a direct democracy and a representative democracy. In a direct democracy, the government, okay, is when the people all have a vote to make the rules and laws, okay? So all help create laws. Now, a direct democracy, when you think of population, you want to think of a small population. Because if you have tens of thousands or even millions of people, it makes it nearly impossible to get things done. Which is why when we look at Rome, the United States has a firmer foundation on a representative democracy. So this is what the U.S. uses today. And this is a government in which the people vote for elected officials, and those elected officials will create laws for us. So here are the citizens, and they can vote for either candidate A or candidate B. And for our purposes, we're going to say that candidate B won. And now that candidate will go on to rule in our government and make laws and rules, etc. Okay? We'll look at the specifics of that. So again, that is a representative democracy. Okay. Now, early forms of representative democracy come to us from the Mayflower Compact. So, for example, here, this was an early attempt at self-government. So before the members of the ship embarked to the United States, or what would become the United States, they set out and created a series, of laws to guide their colony. So this, at its basic sense, is what you need to know about the Mayflower Compact. Attempt at self-government. Now, in the colonies, we have different types of governments are set up. Now, in the northern regions in New England, we had town meetings, And these are examples of direct democracies, where the members of that colony got together and created the laws. In addition, it is important to note that the right to vote was only extended to adult males who belonged to the Puritan Church. So this does exclude many of the men and all of the women who have come to that colony. So it is not very inclusive. But those are New England town meetings, and the key thing here is this was a direct democracy. Further down into the central region of the British colonies, in Virginia, we had the House of Burgesses. And if we take a look here, we notice that we have representatives who are elected, through voting, and they were able to do things such as raise taxes and make laws where you had the head who was a governor, who could overturn the laws. So you had a little bit of an early sense of checks and balances. As that colony progressed, you did also need to have property owners who had the right to vote. Notice here, women were excluded, so they were not allowed to vote. Similar to the New England town meetings. So this is an early form of representative democracy. Very good. Now, as you go through your worksheet, we're going to look at an early example of freedom of speech, freedom of press, which will later make it into the American Bill of Rights that support the Constitution. So here we have the trial of Peter Zenger. This is who it's about. And as you read through this, what you're going to see is this is going to be a fight in early colonial governments over freedom of both speech and the press to write freely without censorship or persecution. At this point, you may want to pause, read through your worksheet, answer some of the questions, and bring any questions you have to class tomorrow.